guys, my name is Loris Vodeb, and today we're going to be doing a short animation demo on how to animate a hug. So for this one, I'm going to be using two characters, obviously, but before we jump in, a little bit about me. So my name is Loris Vodeb, I'm a game animator currently working at Outfit 7. And the most recent project that I've been a part of was Friends 2 that just released a couple of months back. So yeah, that's mostly it when it comes to me. I've prepared a simple scene, simple blocking of two characters hugging each other. I've gone and I've filmed some reference for it. And in moving to something of a spline pass, I think in shots like these, it becomes a bit more important on how to handle certain things like driver-driven and those kinds of relationships where those characters are touching each other. And in the case of this type of hug, which I imagined between two people that haven't seen each other in a long while and they're really close otherwise, so they're really in each other's arms, quite literally. In these types of situations, it becomes really important how we kind of solve those driver-driven dynamics between them. So to jump in, let's turn this to spline so we can see what we're working with. And immediately you can see that some parts are kind of floaty and, you know, in terms of the timing, we might have to do some changes. But hopefully today we can get this shot to something closer, you know, to second pass or maybe even beginnings of polish. We'll see. But to start off with, I want to first focus on one way that you can tackle these sorts of dynamics between driver and driven, right? In this case, the character that's driving the whole thing is the character standing, whilst the other character that's in the air, right, her movements are going to be largely driven by what he is doing, right? So any arcing that he does, that's going to ultimately show up on her as well, right? So in solving those kinds of scenarios and kind of keeping them contained, and also allowing us to have a lot of control over our animation, one way to work with those types of scenes is to create a locator setup with constraints. So to do that, I just created a simple locator on the ground, and I can now place this locator wherever her chest is touching his, right? So that's going to be a point of contact around which she is going to be essentially rotating, right? So I'm just going to put it somewhere here. Doesn't have to be perfect. It's mainly there for us as a reference point. And now once I'm done with the position that I want to work this from, I just simply duplicate that same locator, and I can place one under another and name this one parent. And this one we can name child. And with these two at the same spot, because they're basically duplicated, I can now pick the parent, and the parent is going to be right directly below what our chest of the character that's driving this dynamic is doing. So for example, in this one, we're going to pick first the control and then parent, and then we can constrain, make sure that the constraint maintain offset is on. We can apply that. And now, if I move this parent, right, the child is still going to be moved because it's parented. It's not constrained to it, and we'll see why in just a bit. But now, essentially with the child, we can now pick the child, pick the control, the COG in this case, of the other character, the female character, and we can just make so that these two are also constrained, right? And now with this setup, if we move this character, it's going to move her as well, right? And we can basically pick where this is going to trail off and where we want this influence to happen. So for example, for this frame, we know somewhere here, she's going to jump on him. It's going to be probably this frame here. So until this one, we can keep it to 0. And then from this frame onwards, we can keep it to 1, right? So from this moment on, she's going to be sort of constrained to him. And then we want to pick a place where she's going to let go of him. and we can make this one, for example. So we can go inside here and go into planned parent. Make sure this is all auto tangents, and then this one we can make into 0. So essentially from this moment on, she's going to be back to what she was doing before, right? No longer locked into his position. And already you can see, like, it did change some certain things with our arms and how they are locked onto each other, onto parts of the body. But we can fix most of these problems essentially using that same approach that we just did on the COG here, right? And depending on how basically vigilant we want to be about those sorts of cases and what we want to be like constrained and how much control we want over things, we can decide. But the good thing about this sort of setup is it essentially allows us to be free in dealing with the rig and still having some control while the rig is still being parented to the thing carrying it, in this case, the driver, right? And by that, I mean, we can still pick the child. So for example, here, when she leaps onto him, we can pick the child and we can essentially animate any offsets. So for example, here, she might go slightly above, right? Go slightly up to this and then kind of come back down. And the good thing about it too is it remembers that same location of the original parent. So we know essentially how far this is going to go down and up, and where we have to normalize that same position, right? And it's going to keep those offsets. So we just created a bit of an offset to this COG, but then returned it to the original parent position that we have. So essentially we have now a setup where we can basically have the two characters be constrained to each other, but still have that option to, say, for example, rotate them, right? So rotate her around this, and she's going to stay rotated that way throughout the clip while still being parented to that other character. Now that same approach we can now use on other parts of that character, right? So we can essentially just, again, create a locator. And for the sake of simplicity, let's pick a place where we applied this original parent constraint. So let's see where that was the case. So on this one, for example, right? And we can now use this locator, move it to the place where we have, for example, one of the hands. And just move it here, for example. And the reason why I'm not placing it exactly on the hand itself, but instead on the point of contact with the body, is essentially so we can have that rotation arc around part of that body, right? And essentially the edge of that body part, right? In this case, the hand. So it's going to be the palm where it touches the his back, right? So we don't have to have exactly perfect locations. Let's call this one parent again. It's going to be parent 1 in this case, and then child 1 as well. Let's parent those two. And now same process as before, right? We can pick one control. So in this case, let's pick, again, his torso, and then parent, and then constrain parent. And then the same thing for the child, but for the hand, right? So constrain parent. And now this way we can, again, decide when this is going to take effect. So on the hand itself, we can go 1 before, and we can set this to 0, and then 1 after, and set it to 1. And I believe here, kind of left it off, probably here. So let's say until here, to here. Let's make sure that this is all set to auto tangent. We don't have any blendings. And now already you can see that she is sticking to that location, right? Which is what we want. Any differences, any jumps or things like that, we will plane as we go. But for now, we just want those points of contacts to be in there, right? So let's repeat the process for the other parts of the body, for him and for her. We might not actually have to do it for all the body parts, especially because we're animating for this camera here. So I think we can kind of get away with certain parts not being constrained like this. It's mainly for those that we want to keep control over and that are really detrimental to the shot. So let's do the same thing. Let's place this one here, where the hand is. All right, something like this. Let's duplicate this parent, and we can do this one. It's 2, child 2. Okay. And again, same thing as before. So this one first, this one second, constraint parent, and then the reverse, child, and then the hand, constraint parent. And there we go. So now we can pick for this hand, let's say it's like this, same as we had before. And then here we're gonna have, let's keep it as 1 and then 0 here. And again, let's go into blend parent, make sure this is set to auto. And we should already kind of get this hand locked in position. We're getting some pops just because those poses aren't the same, right? So we can just change that after. But for now, we just want all of those like body parts to be registered. We're kind of losing his hand. I think this one here is a bit more critical. So let's focus on this one first. And if you really wanted to be kind of careful about this whole process, I would advise you also name those locators, because obviously like now you can see that there's quite a lot of them, and we might name them in just a bit, just to kind of keep things organized. This one, let's duplicate, place this one under, and then we're going to create separate groups for all of these. So this one is gonna be driven. Let's find which part, because now we're basically inverting this whole process, right? Whereas before we were picking his control to drive the other controls, now we're gonna be picking her controls. And I think in this case we can pick her hips. So we can just pick this one first, and then the parent, the last parent that we created, this one, and then constraint parent. And now do the same thing, but with this locator. So select this and then constraint parent. So let's test this. If we move our hips, yeah, moves his hand, right? And let's pick the part. So it's going to be from this frame. Let's say this is where we want this to be 0. And then one frame after, it's going to be 1. All right. And all the bits in between, we're going to just animate to this. So here we still want him to hold up until say here, and then we're going to be back to 0 on this one. And then again, auto tangent. We might see parts of this, they're going to be controlled, like you can see the elbow kind of popping in and that sort of thing. So I think those bits we can still control with the elbow, right? So we can just push this elbow outwards a bit more, so it's a bit more like this, and then just, you know, adjust this accordingly to kind of get those shapes working, right? The elbow can also be a bit more loose, I think. I think the elbow is still being partly used to hold her up, in conjunction with the arm. But we can keep it a bit more loose, I think, than compared to the arm, right? Okay. Let's see what we get. Right. The transitions into these poses, I think we still have to work on, but we're getting a cleaner result now. And we're going to see just in a moment how we can now control this better. All right, cool. Let's do the last one. Actually, I said before that we were only going to do this for a couple of these controls, but that's for the sake of consistency. do it on this one as well, and then we can just briefly name these controls, just to keep it organized as I said before. So this one, let's duplicate, and then put this one under this one again. And then for this one, I think it makes sense to pick, let's see. I think for this one, we can pick the upper, this control here. So let's pick that one. Constraint and then the lower one, constraint to this, constraint parent. All right, let's pick a place where this can be applied. So let's see that's also one useful thing in the ref to kind of check out is where the actual point of contact happens, starts from, right? So in this case, it's this one, before he's on 0. So he grabs onto her here and then releases, let's see where, it's probably around here. So that's released by then. We have this, that's F1. And then let's just, again, make sure this is all auto tangent. All right. So I think we're getting a bit of a better result than we had before. Obviously, these transitions into these poses and whatnot, we have to clean a lot, right? But for the most part, we should be closer to something that tracks, right? Cool. Let's see from the behind, just really briefly, so everything works. Right. Cool. I think we're in a good spot to start layering in some detail on there. And before we do, I'm just going to briefly create groups for these, right, so that we know which one is which. So this one was the torso, or let's call it COG. COG Stella. And then we can also hide those locators that we don't need currently, right? The second one was Stella, we can call it Stella right, or actually her left hand, so left and Stella. Okay, we can hide that one. And same goes for all the others, right? So in this case, let's call this one right and Stella. Let's hide this one. And then this is going to be left hand. Stuart. Okay, let's hide that one. And then we're going to basically just focus on each one of the at a time, right? So this one is right hand. Okay, so we have them all named, all grouped. And if we wanted to be really kind of organized in general in our scene, we could group them all under locators, say like that. Cool. So let's start with our COG locator. I think with it here, I don't think we need really all that much change. We might return to it, but for the most part, I think just seeing how she animates and that kind of thing, it works, right? Any retiming and major changes like these, we might still do later while we have all the connections working, right? But for now, I think leaving the COG just for the sake of time here, it should be okay, right? So let's focus on her left hand first. So let's see how we can animate this. There's the big jump between this key and this one, so maybe we can start matching this up a bit. Oh, and we might not be getting it. Oh yeah, because this is the point at which it's constrained. So let's try and match it to this. So let's get this back a bit. So we have the hand being applied here. Right. And then if we wanted this to kind of bounce up against him as she grabs onto him, we could add this on this locator and then zero out the influence here over time. So what we're doing is we're creating this sort of loosiness to it. So it's not completely locked as the standard constraint would be, and instead like playing with how much we want her hands to move over time. So for example, here we might want her to kind of scoot her hand slightly, create a better pose, and then just keep this locked like this before. Like any tiny readjustments that she might do, we can add with this, basically up until she kind of releases from him. So it's going to be this, and then after we don't have control, that meaning we can animate this one from now on. So we can just match those two poses up. Something like this, and then just continue animating from there. We can do the same thing on the other side. So basically, here we could kind of have the arm come in. Okay. There's a pop happening here when she releases. So I think here we can kind of try and match that whole position that we had before. And then just gradually kind of come off of that pose. So we can be a bit more nuanced, right? We're going outside of immediate blocking here. So we can start being a bit more, paying attention to what each body part is doing. Right. So let's say we are happy with this one here. We can continue on down the line. And in this one, let's do the same thing as we did before. So it's going to be here. I think the point of contact works pretty nicely. Obviously, it's going through his body. But from this angle, if we're animating towards this camera, we don't really see that. And for the interest of time, let's keep it simple. So let's say here we wanted just a bit of a reverb on him. So basically a bounce of the arm. And then maybe we could grip him tighter as she goes on. And then degrip. So basically go back from this. Try that. Okay. Let's see how she releases from this position. If it pops, yes, we have a bit of a pop. So that we can then try and match right to the hand position that we had before to kind of alleviate some of that pop that happens here. And also, again, we can pay more attention to how she kind of releases and the pose she's in to kind of come off of this. She's going to be unwrapping that other arm, right? So if we're just paying attention to her, I think we're getting a bit more of a cleaner result in this case, right? So now, let's say we're happy with this one. Let's continue down the chain and go to the other two hands we have. So for this one, let's do the same thing as before. Okay, have quite a big jump here. I think there might be an Euler filter we need to apply. There we go. On this one, before he comes into that position, I think we can be a bit more kind of precise on what we want. So he's going to be wrapping his hand behind. And then from this bit on, he's going to be controlling it with this, I think, right? So let's see. This arrives there. And then we could have a bit of a bounce off. And then a gripping round as he lifts. All of these poses we could still kind of build up on, be a bit more precise, but for now I'm just trying to kind of create some offset, right? I think in the rough I'm kind of wrapping the hand around. Let's try and match that more. And the other hand we might just tweak up a bit more. So yes, let's try use that. Okay. And then here it's slowly gonna start releasing, so you can already kind of prepare for that. Here as well. So you might just unwrap that arm a bit more and start going into that kind of out position, right? Where it kind of leaves off from. So let's keep it there. Try and work through this transition here. There's a bit of bounciness happening here throughout these couple of frames, but let's try and match that. Okay. And then throughout this section, I think we can unwrap his arms a bit more, so it's kind of releasing. And let's see what kind of result we get. Alright. The elbow, I think we can kind of fix on him some more, because I think it's all over the place. So here we can just push it a bit more down, and then here as well. And then here probably push it a bit more up, and then fine. Let's see what we get. Okay, I think we're getting a bit more of a cleaner result on him. Cool, nice. Let's focus on that last hand, and then from there we can see what we can still apply. We're gonna try and get some more polish on this, but the main part of this tutorial was really to kind of explore this approach to having control over characters and having control over constraints, really, so that they don't really constrain you completely, right? That they kind of leave it open so that you can really work with those, controls, but not in a way where you basically trying to frame by frame certain areas, right? You can see that this really gives us that opportunity to kind of work and be sparing in terms of like points of contact and when those points of contact are locked in, right? So, okay, so let's focus on this last one then, and let's see what we have from there. So this one, again, we have a bit of a bounce happening here. So let's try and fix that. Can probably unfurl the arm and then probably go one by one here. This one we can bring out a bit more so that it's sort of, let's key that one actually. Oh, I keyed the wrong locator. That's my mistake. Let's go back to where we had the other locator. All right, this one should be correct. So let's go back to this, and then let's wrap his hands slightly more around her. Let's try and find that pose. Alright, so like this. Probably to this pose we can kind of get faster. This beginning part we're going to clean as we get there, but for now let's just focus on this arm. So it's probably going to be doing something like this as she goes, because here he's releasing her right at the time. So let's try and get this pose to kind of happen there naturally, and then basically here we're back to the locator, right? So we can try and match that same pose. And we might have some Euler filter stuff there, so let's alleviate that. Let's see what we get. Alright, so this part in the middle there I think is a bit floaty, so let's try and contain that a bit more. So we can either pick one pose or the other. I think here we sort of lost the... So let's try and delete this one just to see what we get. We can probably just reposition the hand slightly. get a better grip. So it's going to be something like that. And then let's see where we want that reposition to occur. It's this kind of thing. Or maybe we can hide it in more of this kind of action that happens later. So let's move these keys around a bit. Actually, let's move this to the other side. Let's see what happens we get. We could even go straight into this one. Let's see. As you can see, I'm trying to kind of find keys and where I want those connections to happen. I think this part here is still a bit glitchy, so let's focus on this one. Okay. And sometimes, if you really want, you can use those same locators that we created, basically to match those same positions. So not only does this approach kind of alleviate, so you're not essentially animating one frame at a time, it's also providing sort of a reference for where that hand is going to be when it's constrained, so that you can use this approach. Like say, if, for example, here we wanted to match that same location, we could select first the hand control and then the locator to which it's eventually going to be constrained to. And then we can go into modify, match transformations, match all transforms, and in the options tab, just turn off scale, right? Because we want the locator and the control to stay the same size, right? And sometimes you can see that this creates an opposite rotation, but it at least puts our control at the same spot as the locator is, right? So here you can now see that we're much closer there to the actual pose that we want, right? So let's try and match this. Something like that. And I think this part here, whenever it starts going in, I think this can happen a bit faster. Let's see. Even this one. So there's still this band here that happens from here to here. Let's try and do this there sooner. Alright. And as he gets there, let's try and just make this a bit more gradual, so it's not happening so abruptly. Right, so in this one here, let's just make this go in a bit more gradually, a bit more gently. All right, cool. So there's obviously still some problems that we have. For example, the elbows here throughout this mid section are going through this hand. I think we can just go pose by actually just focus on fixing those elbows, so we can just bring those up. Oh. We could also go in and obviously switch the other hand, right? It might be a better solution here, but just for the interest of time, let's focus on doing it this way. All right, let's see what we have. All right. Cool. So there's still problems. There's still obviously things that we can fix, like, for example, the elbows here, the shoulders on her, and things like that to match their poses more closely. But with this setup, as you can see, we're essentially able to control basically where we control the characters, where their hands stick to each other, and if we put those locators at the tips of fingers and things like that, we can have that really nice control over the pivot point of where we're rotating certain body parts from. And the use of this approach really depends on how much in depth you want to go, because obviously you could apply this to any sort of control or feature on the body and have control over how it's going to be constrained to that surface, right? There's other certain things that you can use, like rivet tools and things like that, which create basically a locator on a specific part of geo, which then you can use as a reference point. So there's definitely many different ways that you can go about this. But this I find to be one approach which really gives you a lot of control, and also makes you not animate over one frame at a time, right? So yeah, so I think that's it for today. Hopefully this was helpful. It was interesting to look at. If you have any questions or any things, feel free to contact me or Animation Mentor. But with that said, thanks so much for checking this out, and hope to see you soon.